welcome to a very special edition of Masters of the Universe Director's Commentary. Well, no, it's not like those very special after-school specials where I'm going to, tell you not to do drugs or that those feelings you're having are okay. It's special because we're talking about something that's not a figure for the first time. I think every single one of these we've done has been an action figure so far, right? Unless I'm mistaken, because we haven't gotten to Castle Grayskull yet. We're talking about an accessory pack. Why an accessory pack? Well, I'm ToyGuru Neitlich. I was the brand manager for Masters of the Universe Classics for, about like 95% of it, until kind of like the last few figures, and the ones, of course, Super 7 did. And today we're talking about the first non-figural execution in the line, which was the weapons pack, which was based on this weapons pack. Notice the P-A-K spelling, because, it's not a He-Man toy if it's not, spelled without a few consonants or something like that. So there was a vintage weapons pack. This was it, for those of you who are unfamiliar with it and what came. And the first weapon pack that we offered, and we wound up offering quite a few because they sold well, it was a direct homage to the vintage one. Of course, it had some things that the vintage one didn't have, and it had some things it did have. And I'm going to kind of go through all of the items that were included in it and discuss a little bit about why we included each, and maybe some things that weren't included, and future weapons packs. So let's jump in. So first off, the name. So I was very deliberate when we put this pack out. I tried to kind of maximize every amount of real estate. And we called this pack the Ultimate Battleground Pack. And that was because both A, in the vintage line, you had that Ultimate Battleground, and then, of course, in the modern line, eventually we got to the second Ultimate Battleground, which was basically the name for the battles fought before the Three Towers. And this was all done deliberately to keep the story going. The idea was each pack was going to be named after a major battle in Eternia history. It wasn't necessarily the weapons used at that battle, but it was kind of using the pack's names to help push the story forward. Since we had no cartoon, we had no comic book, we could at least use the names. So like this one, End of Wars Weapons Pack, again, this was going to be the name of the battle between Skeleton and Dare, was going to be called the End of Wars. We never really quite got to that mini-comic, but that was the idea. So each pack was jammed-packed, no pun intended, with all sorts of colorful weapons, a lot of them different versions of weapons you already had, and there were quite a lot of interesting decos of weapons throughout the line, some odd, some funny, some serious. In the line of the more serious weapons, to kick off the pack, we had some items directly designed for Kronis, the alter identity or the pre-Trapjaw identity of this character. So we had a sword and we had a blaster. These were both absolutely intended and designed for Kronis. I can't recall if the Horseman threw these in the first place and we had to cut them from Trapjaw due to him having so much stuff. He had, all the attachments, the multiple heads, the multiple arm, or if we asked them to deco them after the fact. I honestly don't 100% recall, but I do know we talked about really wanting to give Kronis his own weapons, because when he, Trapjaw is so weapon heavy, the idea was when he was in his more, less cyborg form, he needed to be armored up. So doing a sword and a gun specifically for him was what we did. Next up, we have the whip. So the original whip in the original vintage line was actually cloth, which I actually kind of wish we did a cloth one as an homage to that, but that would have been a story for another time. We'll cover that maybe with another Beastman video down the line. So Beastman came with a black whip, which, so of course, the vintage figure did. The reason that we did the red whip is from the movie. I will be blatant. This red whip in the movie just, stuck into my brain as a child. I thought this was the coolest thing ever. A laser whip? I don't know what it was about it, but it was my favorite part of the movie. And at this point, I didn't know if we'd ever get to Blade. I didn't know if we'd ever get to movie figures. I didn't know how far the line was going to go. So we put the red whip in there as kind of an homage to the movie whip, to a laser whip. I don't know if people kind of got that, since the handle was also colored red, but that was the idea. All right, the Beastman armor in yellow included in this pack. This was kind of one of the first items that was literally put in there because it was a direct translation of the Vintage Weapon Pak. The Vintage Weapon Pak came with Beastman's armor in yellow, both his shoulder harness and his uh, bicep thingies, attachments, armor. So basically, yeah, what slipped over his head and what slipped onto his arms, basically. And this is how a lot of people wound up displaying their Beastman back in the day. The yellow actually kind of popped really well off of the orange-red fur that the vintage Beastman had. And that was basically why we were going to include this with the weapons pack. You know, anytime that we could just do a direct update, it made sense because most, you know, just like the vintage or the figures in classics were all supposed to be, you know, an updated, you know, modern take on the vintage line. Same thing with the weapons pack. And, you know, it's interesting how the Beastman wearing the yellow armor has almost even become a legitimate variant down the line, you know, with customizers or other companies and stuff like that. So if you want to, you know, swap around your Beastman armor and give him the yellow armor or keep the red one, hey, more power to you. The whole idea was to give you options. It's also why we made the head swappable from day one. Swords wouldn't be a Masters of the Universe weapons pack if it didn't have swords, right? You kind of need swords and guns because those are the two things that make the brand MOTUC, you know, if you will. So the vintage weapon pack came with a blue sword, and this was the only way to get a blue sword in the vintage line. It didn't come with any of the figures. You know, it was kind of both odd and neat. You know, because there weren't, you know, the power swords were basically limited to orange, purple, and gray in the vintage line, and I guess yellow with Thunder Punch. So I think I've mentioned this before, and the idea was that whichever character held the Sword of Power, the Sword of He, it changed color based on that character. That was sort of the incontinuity of how we explained it. So each of the other, you know, the He-Men that came before Prince Adam, who were guardians before the true He-Man was going to come along, including this guy, Vicor, if you will. He was noted as one of the He-Men that guarded the sword. Of course, based on the prototype He-Man art, but we'll get to Vicor down the line when we get to his video. So the blue sword was meant for him, basically. He didn't come with a Sword of He power sword simply because he was already loaded up with all sorts of stuff between his sword and his axe and his shield and the cape and the chains, so we couldn't put that in. So that was his sword. Triclops, another sword-wielding villain, and you know, he was kind of transformed into an inventor from the 2000X series, but originally he was a sword-wielding assassin, which I kind of think I wish we went heavier on that. In the cross-sell on the vintage figure, you may recall his sword had a yellow hilt and silver blade, like a, you know, traditional metal blade. And this, you know, obviously wasn't the sword you got with the vintage figure or in this color, because, I mean, all the vintage figures kind of had one colored weapons. And he also wielded this sword in his mini comic, which, you know, one of those figures we actually never got to was mini comic Trapjaw. That would have been cool. But yeah, so this was kind of a way of getting that sword. So we took the original Trapjaw sword that the Horseman painted green to go with the rest of his armor and the rest of his accessories, and simply did a version in the mini comic / cross-sell colors. So you could use the original one that came with the figure, which is here, or you could use the mini comic one now. So hey, again, all about customizing. Next up, we have the Stratus Backpack. So for those in the know in the vintage line, Stratos came in two different variants with the wings and the jetpack swapped. And the first release we did in MOTUC Classics had the blue jetpack and the red wings. This was also because this was how he was done in the 2000X line, so it kind of came to be his sort of default version that he was going to have the red wings. But we knew a lot of fans had the blue-winged, red backpacked version when they were kids, myself included. That was the version I had. And so it made sense. Hey, let's do the backpack in red. We also obviously were limited to what tooling we had on hand. There was no new tooling for this. Now, eventually, we did do the other version of Stratos, and we differentiated that one with some red highlights on the jetpack. So it was still a little different from the one you got in the weapons pack, the version from the DC versus MOTUC 2-pack pictured here. So, again, customization. You could put on any pack you wanted, the flat red, the red with the custom highlights, all sorts of things. And you could put the pack on other people, too. If He-Man wanted a jetpack, or Tila wanted a jetpack, or, who knows? Anyway, you get a jetpack, you get a jetpack. Okay. Another sword was the 2000X sword. This was the version that came with Man-at-Arms, since in the continuity he built this sword. That came from the Horseman's original pitch for the 2000X line. Their original pitch was that Skeletor had both halves of the sword, so He-Man needed a replacement, and Man-at-Arms built an electronic version. So here it is in the 2000X toy line, and you could see it had these green highlights on it, which did not come in the version in the Masters of the Universe Classics Man-at-Arms. So, since, again, we had that tool available, we said, hey, let's paint it in sort of true 2000X colors. And that's what you got here. So that was really cool. Again, we were sort of scouring what tooling was available, and since this was kind of the second year of the line, we only had a year and a half's worth of tools to go through to see what we could pull out. Another one that made sense based on what was available was Hordak's Crossbow, because in the vintage line, his crossbow was white. And for those of you who collected the Masters of the Universe Classics Hordak, who came out very early in the line, which I was very excited about. It was kind of the first figure that wasn't a original 8-pack in the Classic series, unless you count King Grayskull, which of course I do, but I'm on a tangent. The Hordak figure, the Horseman did a black deco to kind of match his armor and call it his personality. So the black crossbow that came with Hordak, while it was really cool looking, it did disappoint some fans because the vintage figure had that white crossbow. Now, we did do another white crossbow with Hordak with the Spirit version down the line, and we differentiated that from the version in the weapon pack by painting the eyes red. So, again, making sure everything was a little different. All right, rounding out the weapons pack, a few last items. One would be this set of purplish, pinkish, Zodakish armor. Now, we did this because we wanted to include Zodak armor, or Zodak, with the K or the C, Cosmic Enforcer armor, shall we say. Now, the black armor that came in the vintage pack was notoriously used on the quote-unquote Wonder Bread He-Man. You can see the video on him here in my review of Wondar. So we just did this armor in the Masters of the Universe Classics line. And while in the vintage line, a lot of people who had the weapons pack, either used it on Wondar or probably more likely just used it on Zodak or used it on another character because Wondar really wasn't that well known in the 80s. It didn't become a thing until the internet. And since we just did the Wondar or the Cosmic Enforcer, what I call the E armor, because, that E symbol, if you look at it on its side, we just did it with Wondar, so obviously we weren't going to put black armor in the weapon pack. That would have been a little redundant, as well as the black gun. So instead, it was this sort of pinkish purple color, and that wound up being good fodder for customizers who wanted to sort of build out their Cosmic Enforcer line and make characters stand out a little bit different, make them, who knows? I mean, hey, you could use it on all sorts of characters. Again, that was the whole point of Classics, was why we made the armor removable and the head swappable from day one, was to embrace the customizer aspect of the adult collector market. Something I wish more toy lines would do. I think they'd do better if they kind of embraced that. In fact, I did a video about that. Check it out here. And the question of why purple? Well, honestly, I'm a big fan of purple. Purple's my favorite color. It came out a little pinker than I expected. It was supposed to be a deeper purple, kind of like this guy here. I like purple. What can I say? It's my favorite color. And when Terry asked me what color to make the armor, I was like, hey, let's make it purple. I like purple. Hey, sometimes that's what happens. Last up, we had a couple silver weapons, and for the most part, these were just meant to be anonymous weapons that any character could use. They weren't specific to any one character, except for maybe the Scare Glow axe, which was repainted in silver. If you didn't want the glow in the dark, or the green one with the glow-in-the-dark blade, you just wanted to give him a more traditional axe, you could now do that. But otherwise, they really weren't intended for anyone specific. They were just extra goodies and extra weapons. Now, we did do more weapons packs as the line kept growing, and again, we used them to name all of the major battles of Eternia throughout the ages, not necessarily in continuity order, but at least giving them names. And that kind of would help to make, bookend marks throughout the history. And it made sense since the battles were like major parts of history, they would be named. And some of the packs had, dropped items like the Strobo Blaster that was shown but unfortunately couldn't be included. But we managed to actually get some tooling for later packs. The original packs had no tooling, but later packs did. And we were also able to creatively offer fan-demanded repaints of accessories and even a little figure in one of the packs of Cowl. And we'll get to that when we get to the review of that pack to come, because there's a lot more to come. Well, the line's really just getting started. I mean, we're in 2010, and I'm literally going SKU by SKU, and we have quite a few years in front of us. And if you want to get a sneak peek of what's coming in the next review, if you've been cutting off the videos too early, stick around for those last 15 seconds, because there's always a little funny nod to the next one.